Hey. You there? There you are. So my dogs are going crazy because the doorbell came on when you came on, and then they think it's the doorbell outside. Hey. I think you're muted too. There you are.
We have that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to do this in the house, but we have some people in the house, so I came out where the green screen is. So I don't have I didn't want it to just be green, so I'll just be in ancient Athens.
I like that. I was wondering what room that would be in that you have that.
Yeah. So, well, you can probably see the green around. Usually, there's a little green sheen. With
Kinda, not really though.
With the green screen.
Yeah. So how are you?
I'm doing all right. Did a lot of walking today.
Nice.
So walked over to campus and walked the dogs. So.
How many dogs do you have?
I'm sorry?
How many dogs do you have?
3.
Okay.
We have 2 kind of rescues and 1 that we got as a pup.
Okay. I don't remember if I met any of them when I went over that. I remember going over there one time, but I don't know if I remember meeting any dogs.
The one's like a Chihuahua, one's a Boston, and I think we got the last one after you would have come over.
Okay. Doesn't seem like it was that long ago, but it was.
I know, time passes, doesn't it?
So just a heads up, I should have told you this already, but it is recording already.
Right,
so
I saw.
We have to make sure we don't make fun of anybody now.
Okay, well, I'll do my best.
So I guess I could give you a little background on, I know I told you a little bit already, and you watched the other 2. My father-in-law's calling me. He's bored out of his mind. He's over at a convalescent hospital right now. And so he calls Annie and he calls me to kind of just check in and see what we're doing so that he could, I guess, have some excitement. Anyways, so basically what I'm trying to do is create this just so maybe even like a distraction for students to get away from whatever else is going on, and then also for them to stay connected to me, to stay connected to each other, and then also to learn about academics at Stanislaus who may not know different people, different professors, different students. And also I told you already, but you were scheduled to come in for April 1st for the Educator panel for my Liz 1000 class. And so I'm trying to also reach out to those who are going to be doing that to see if I could still do the panel without having everybody in person, obviously, which we can't do. So that's kind of where we are. And it's a conversation. I obviously have bullet points that I want to try to cover, but that's basically it. Plus, it's a way for me to catch up with people I care about. So that's where we are. Can you start just by telling us about yourself, what you do at Stanislaus, and I can ask more questions, but kind of, yeah, what you do at Stanislaus, who you are, that kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah, well, I'm Mark Thompson. I came to Stanislaus in the fall of 1993. I'm in the English department, and I am a professor of rhetoric. For a long time, my label was professor of English, but I petitioned to have my title changed to professor of rhetoric, and so that's what I am now. And I did that because I think that everything I teach is really teaching rhetoric. And so I teach a lot of general education classes, teaching teachers how to teach, graduate classes, and I'm also involved in a lot of faculty governance activities and have been for a long time, but I think that's probably not as relevant to this discussion.
Yeah, sorry. I think it is, I mean, you don't have to go too deep into it, but can you kind of just touch on what you do as far as the governance and those and different committees? And the reason I'm asking is because I know as a student when I was at Stanislaus and still am, but as an undergrad, I didn't really understand all the different. I just thought professors came in, they taught, they did their office hours, and they moved on. And now that I'm on the other side of it, I realize there's a lot that takes place that students, for the most part, probably don't know about. And so, like I said, I don't think you need to go into into a lot of depth, but if you could just kind of talk about some of the things you do, I think it'd be interesting.
Well, let me try it in just a kind of the most general way, and it's really about something that may come up later in the discussion. That I think the most important thing that teachers do is they create curriculum. They create assignments. They run their classes, and for me, we have a lot of committees, different like academic technology committees, educational policies committees, um, retention, promotion, and tenure committees, and all of those are really just to ensure that faculty at the university maintain control over the curriculum. In other words, we don't have administrators or even central administration down in Long Beach that are shaping the curriculum. It's really trying to maintain as much as we can that we control how we develop the curriculum and what we teach. And that's, when you think about it, that's so important if you're going to call yourself a university, that the faculty actually design and deliver the curriculum. And so what all these committees that sometimes people make fun of are really doing is trying to, at the heart of it, is making sure that we maintain control of how the curriculum is developed. So that's the central part of it for me.
No, I think you're right. It's important to hear for a couple of reasons. One of them is this idea of, well, the funny part is being made fun of occasionally. And the one that got me the first time was when I saw that there's a committee on committees.
Right.
And just the language of that, without knowing everything, just hearing the language, you can see how an outsider would view it as like, what are we doing? There's, all these different things. So I think you did a good job of explaining why those things are important.
I would say to people who are going to be in K-12 education, that you can do the same sorts of things. You get involved above the classroom level in ways that will help you, help teachers maintain that kind of control in K-12, where I would say it's even more important and more difficult to do.
Yeah, that was the second thing I was going to hit on. So I'm glad you did, because there's I don't know if you read it, but Terry Moe, I think the piece is called Rediscovering the Democratic Purposes of Education. And so I had my 3009 students just read that, and I'm reading their reader responses. I just finished reading them. And it seems like a lot of eyes were opened as far as who has control and who has the authority, and the kind of the lack of autonomy in K-12 sometimes. And so I think that it's a really timely discussion to be having too, for them to start thinking about those things now. And it's something I try to push a lot in my courses, because I think a lot of teachers, whether it's, I guess specifically K-12, they are excited about teaching. I see them get into it, excited about teaching and really like motivated. And then once they start getting into the grind of, oh, I can't do this, or I can't do that, or I have all these responsibilities or obligations, then it seems like that kind of falls away. And that's one of my biggest fears for my students, is to see all the excitement in them now, and then when they get into the grind of things, to slowly let that go away and start handing out worksheets and that kind of thing.
Right. And I taught high school for 4 years, grades 9 through 12, in a little town in Oklahoma, but it's been a long time ago. But I always made the curriculum something of my own. I taught what I thought was important to teach, whatever the curriculum was that they presented me with. So
I think we should go down that real quick, or a little bit longer. Just kind of, I'm interested in sharing with you how I try to help students with that and kind of set them up to be successful in that way. But I'm interested to see if you think that's a good direction, or if you would add or take things out. So the way I kind of teach students or try to direct them is to make sure that they're getting involved in the community where they're teaching. They're connecting with the parents. They're going to conferences, maybe even publishing, so that when it's time for them, being a professional, so that when it's time to make an argument or stand up for what you believe in as an educator, the principal or the admin's not looking at you as, oh yeah, you're that teacher who's always complaining in the break room. Instead, you're the person who, I think I just lost you. Okay, we're good to go. So I guess my question is, what would you suggest to future K-12 educators as far as having not autonomy, but keeping their grasp or having control of the curriculum, so that they don't get overwhelmed or jaded or bitter and just kind of have to check out? Or do you think, I guess the other question I can ask is, do you think that the way I kind of presenting this to students, the idea of community, parental engagement, going to conferences, publishing, not complaining in the break room, those kind of things, do you think those are effective, or would you add anything?
Yeah, well, I would start by saying that I imagine the situation is very much different from when I experienced, and with the whole 20 years of the assessment, the increasing pressure of the assessment movement. I think it probably is more difficult to do that. But I think even if you are presented with a certain kind of curriculum that you're supposed to deliver, that you can still have your pedagogy be different. You can think about the different ways. I mean, something as simple as using group work or not using group work can be something that you do to try and make the curriculum your own, or the way that you use technology to interact with students is another way. So I'm not really up on what the situation is right now, but I would just say, if you're presented something, that doesn't mean you just have to be a pass-through for that curriculum, but that you can have an influence in the way that you deliver it.
No, and I appreciate that. The other thing, just based off of knowing you for as long as I have, you're a leader in what you do. So you're not someone who, I mean, I know it's plenty to do, but you're not someone who just goes to the classroom and teaches, but you take on these roles in committee and governance. And so that's obviously a priority to you to do that, because you know the importance of it. Do you think in K-12, would you have any suggestions for K-12 and how to develop yourself as a leader, just in how you carry yourself, not even like a technical, go to this person or go to that person, but just in carrying yourself? Is there a certain way that you could stand out as an educator?
One thing is, it goes back to the idea of committee work. A lot of people think that's not fun or not valuable. Doing something like committee work, it does help you when you interact, say, with administrators. One of the things you're doing is you're building your own institutional memory. And for people who aren't involved in that way, when something comes up that they want to accomplish, then they're looking for someone who knows how things happen or knows how things get done above the classroom level. And they look to people who have a lot of institutional memory and know how things happen at that particular school site, or how to get things done. So I still think it's well worth your time in accomplishing your own goals, and also in helping your colleagues to do that stuff that's a little bit above the level of your classroom, and have that kind of involvement.
You also reminded me of go ahead, sorry.
That includes being, I would just say, if you're unionized, that would include being involved in union activities as well.
Mm-hmm. I think that's something that's been wonderful as far as for faculty at Stanislaus. I know with the CFA, I feel very strong and comfortable with them as a union, and knowing that they're going to stand up for their faculty. The other thing you made me think about was a doctoral class I was taking where Dr. Riggs was talking about culture. So the culture of the school from over a period of time. So this idea of institutional memory also connects with the culture of what's taking place at that school. And if you're involved in that culture, then when people, like you said, when people think about, oh, I need someone to help me with this, or who should I go to with this, then your name starts popping up more and more, rather than if you're not involved, and it's easier to kind of be, I guess, pushed to the boundaries when those things happen.
Yeah, and I think the entire CSU has a culture of strong faculty governance, and I think Stanislaus is one of the places where it's known to be particularly fierce in defending the curriculum.
Yeah, I got to see that a little bit on Academic Senate, and I was happy to see that. That was something positive I took away from that. One of the bullet points, and it kind of feels like it's going backwards a little bit more into an introduction, but I mentioned to you, you have an interesting kind of background prior to going into teaching. And I know I've talked to you a little bit about it, but I don't know all the specifics. But could you talk about kind of the work you did before being an educator?
Yeah. Well, my first job outside of my home, outside of my family. I used to help my dad with his work. But my first job outside of my family was a shoe shine boy in a barber shop. So I don't know if that job exists anymore.
I don't think so. I like that though.
But I would just say it this way. I grew up in Oklahoma in the 1960s. My dad was not literate, and one of the really striking memories I have is of him sitting at a table with my mother. He was applying for a supervisor's job. He worked civil service, and she would ask him the questions. He would give his answers, and she would write them down on the application. He didn't get that job, and I came to realize later is because he didn't really understand the rhetoric of that form that he was responding to. And that always stayed with me, and it really showed me the power of literacy, because that was very stark memory when he didn't get that job. So I really associate power and a power with literacy, and just things like you have better health, better longevity, the more you go to school. And I mean, that should motivate teachers, in teaching their students. One more thing, is that what I felt like I got out of education besides that was the ability to take multiple perspectives. And that's been very durable for me, that belief that the more I read, the more I studied, the more perspectives I could take on whatever curriculum or whatever issue I was looking at. That's the most valuable thing that I got out of education. And for all of those things, power, better health, better longevity, multiple perspectives, all you have to do is keep going to school.
And that's I don't want to get too deep into the conversation I just had with my mom, but my mom's a student right now. She retired and decided to go. She wanted to finish her associate's degree. And so she's writing a paper, and she shared it with me on Google Docs, and she wants me to go through it with her and that kind of thing. So about 2 nights ago, I went through it with her. And then just now, before this started, she wanted to go over it briefly. And I think a lot of times I get frustrated, and it's not with my mom or with my students, but I think the frustration comes from when students aren't at that point yet to understand the power of literacy, because you're not upset with them, but you're upset with the fact that if I don't do my job and they don't get it, then those kind of things, there's going to be things that they miss out on and opportunities that they don't have because of those. They're not even aware that those things are out there. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of my thought on that.
Well, yeah. You talk about your mom. I feel like I should get my wife to come in and talk to you because she teaches high school, and she is, I mean, that's the real strength that I see in her is that, she works with students who have difficulties, and she is able to motivate them and get them to see those sorts of things.
Hmm.
But it is very difficult, and it's something I don't think I realized it when I was in high school. But maybe you just have to count on your students. Most of them will recognize it in retrospect.
Yeah, and I think so. You're ahead of me at least because you said high school. I didn't realize it till I was 29 years old and going to Stanislaus that it took me a long time to understand the significance of education and literacy, like you said, and the power that comes along with that. Going back to what you said about your wife, you don't have to do this by any means, but we did have a guest last time. So if she ever does want to come in and just throw in some tidbits of advice, she's more than welcome to do that.
Okay.
Um, what actually let's go try to go a little lighter, I guess. How are you coping with the I guess that's not lighter, COVID-19 and the quarantine, and how are you passing your time, and what are you up to?
Yeah, it's some longer dog walks, longer walks. That's one thing. Um, I just finished reading Hilary Mantel's The Mirror and the Light. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but she's done a series of 3 books over several years that are about Thomas Cromwell, and mainly his time when he was serving for Henry VIII. Historical fiction's always been my favorite genre. There's also a PBS Masterpiece Theater 6-episode series called Wolf Hall that's about the first 2 books. But she just came out with the last book, and it was I think 750 something pages, and I just finished that. So I was been doing a lot of reading. And I'll just say briefly, the other night I was almost done, and I I kept reading and reading, and I thought, I should just stop. And it's the feeling that you have when you're a kid reading a book and you
Uh-huh.
just keep reading. And I very rarely get to have that now, but it was such a good feeling. And I forget, oh, I need to go to bed. No, I'm going to stay up and finish this. And it really reminded me of when I was in my teens and had that. I go to bed and read and think I needed to go to sleep, but I wanted to keep reading. So that was a good feeling. Uh, Doing just reading for school, the main thing is switching over classes.
Mhm.
So
So that's kind of a good segue because I want to talk about that too and see so students get an understanding of behind the scenes of what you're doing as a professor. But before we do that, you reminded me of um, I'm jealous because it seems like the only reading I do now is doctoral articles and stuff like that for my lit review. But the last time I remember having that feeling was I think it's the world's largest man or world's strongest man. It was Harrison Scott Key, and he's nonfiction, and he wrote a book about his father, and each chapter was a different aspect about his relationship with his father. I remember sitting there just reading it as fast as I could, as long as I could, until I would sit out in front until Annie would pull in for the end of the day because I wanted to read it all the way up to the point that she got there. And I flew through that book. And so it reminded me of that. And I'm looking forward to finishing my dissertation so I can get back to reading those things.
well, there's always short stories.
Yeah. So let's talk. Go ahead. Sorry.
You reminded me when I was working on my dissertation, I read a lot of Russian short stories. So,
Uh-huh.
yeah. So,
Were there any, do you remember any offhand that you would recommend?
well, what is it? Gogol, the overcoat I think that's the overcoat is one. Yeah.
Okay. I'm writing all these things down so I can go. I'm going to try to start in the little description of the video, start posting like, come to listen to us talk about this, and this, and then links to all the different stuff that come up. So we'll see how I do with that. So let's talk about the behind the scenes of being a professor or a teacher, having to convert everything over? How's that going? How did you approach it? How are you approaching it?
Well, okay. Yeah, both of my classes, I use this reacting to the past pedagogy, which you're of course familiar with, but just for others that it actually is, it gives students a role in a historical situation. So one that we're playing right now in my rhetoric class is about the Athenians in 403 BC, that after they came out from under the yoke of the Spartans, deciding what kind of government they're going to have, a democracy or an oligarchy. Um, but the key is it puts students, they post their speeches, and there are others who are opposed to them who read their speeches ahead of time, and then they have to answer questions live in class. And so we were about a third of we had played 2 of the 6 sessions of the game, and then classes stopped. So I had to convert a live face-to-face kind of emotional charged debate, and now we're doing it on Zoom. So that's
how's that going? Because so one of the things you just said was, I'm obviously familiar with it. Just so everybody knows, I was your teaching assistant for 4010. I think the first time you taught it.
the first time ever, yeah.
Yeah. So just
Thank
hearing
God,
you say
man,
that.
since I had you do that, I was successful, and I kept on doing it. I'm thankful.
But since, as you said that, like I was thinking about our time together doing that, and that would be the way we were planning and the way we were getting after it, and then all of a sudden to have that thrown up in the air, to have to switch that I imagine that would be very stressful. So you're using Zoom. How's Zoom working?
Well, I would say just one little thing before that is it was very difficult. When I was making the slides for the last class meeting that we had, the first item on the slide is we shall not meet again.
Mm-hmm.
And that I won't meet that class. Those students, it was a strong bond when you get into a game like that, and then to have to go in to class and say that, it was emotional just typing that slide up. The students are carrying it pretty well. We just had one game sessions beforehand. They carried it very well. Most are participatory. If you've used Zoom for classes, sometimes people they shut down their video and you don't know what they're doing. Some students, you can see them on video and they're not, they're doing something else. But most of the students they're committed, and I think they're trying to make it successful. The other thing is I was just last night typing up 3 options. One, after we finished playing this game, to ask them, are we going to play another game, or do you want to just stop and go back to just having reading assignments and responding to them? Because I feel at the moment like I need to give them that option. There's so much going on, if it's really not as good as the face-to-face class, and they feel it's not worth the trouble, I'll take that into consideration, but I want to ask them about it when we finish playing this game. So it may be another big change for all of us in a couple of weeks.
Now, are you keeping the same class time that you originally
Yes.
had, or you are doing that? Okay. And on the other thing I'm thinking about with Zoom is, because you probably have 25 students, right?
Right.
So are you breaking them into different groups, or is everybody on at once?
No, everyone's on at once. There's like, I think 28 people, if everybody's there. I have 2 preceptors, so there's 28 people in the room, including me, when we have class. And I just use the Brady Bunch kind of view, where everybody's on screen all the time. We don't use the speaker view. And and that's how we run it. Everybody sees everybody all the time.
You're giving me ideas as far as throwing the option out there and asking students in my writing for teachers class, because one of the things I think students really enjoy about that class is the prompt of the day, where we write and then we share our writing, and it's a good way to build community and connect. And so I'm not going to ask them to every day be doing that, but I think I'm going to ask them if they want to, maybe once a week, just all get together. And they don't all have to get on there, but see if we can get a group together on there to do that, because I think that's a good thing to continue doing if they want to. I thought I was going to ask you something else about. So when do you find out how they? Because you've already asked them, right?
No.
You're
So,
going to.
No, I'm gonna wait until we're going to do the last. We have 2 more sessions in the game, and then we have what we call the post-mortem, where we just have a discussion of how the game went. And then when we have that post-mortem discussion, I'm also going to share with them a page with the 3 options on it, and then they'll just go to a survey and pick which option they want, and they can give any kind of additional comments of things that I haven't thought about. But it's just a sheet that says, here are the pros and cons of each one. And I'm giving 3 options because, and again, this is not important, but I'm giving them 3 options because the second game we're playing is very complicated and I've never run it before. So I'm giving them one option is that we would go back and play the Fred Douglass game, where they've already done most of the readings for that. So, and I think it would run more smoothly.
I think I was looking over here because I think I have the binder still, the Fred Douglass binder for how to play that game and everything. What is your gut telling you? What do you think they're going to say? That they want to do the game, or they want to go to reading discussions?
I feel that they'll lean towards playing the Fred Douglass game, because the problem with that is that they bought a book for the other game, but they wouldn't have to buy an additional book to play Fred Douglass. I would just give them the materials for that.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But my feeling is that they'll lean that way.
So that's 4010. What else are you teaching? I'm
teaching a graduate class. It's a seminar that's a special topics. I can pick the topics. So this is a rhetoric of birth, life, and death class. And it's mainly about death.
Yeah, that's what I was going to.
Which is, go figure, teaching it this semester.
Right. And then was that a big, because that's probably like 10 or 15 students, right?
14, yes.
14. Was that a big shift for that one, or is that more of a simple shift?
Well, this is different because I have my own game that's about physician-assisted suicide that I wanted to test with the graduate class so they could help me improve it. I thought they would have more to say about what didn't work and what's wrong, what could be added. And we're supposed to start that right after spring break. So we will completely do that game without any face-to-face preparation. We will completely do that game in Zoom. So that's even more difficult.
Right. Is that an evening class?
Yes.
And that's going to stay the same time?
Yes.
Okay. And are you doing a stretch course?
No, I'm just teaching these 2 courses. I had other stuff that I was, I'm chair of a committee, a university level committee, that I got a course release for that.
So the other thing that I kind of thought of when you were mentioning the different classes is you're also kind of I mentioned to you already, you're my go-to for academic advice, but you're also my go-to for technology. If there's things that I want to learn more about, or I like talking to you about what you're using, because you seem to always be current on what's coming up or what's going on. And whenever I talk to you, you usually have a new website or application or something that you're looking at. So is there any technology that you're using besides Zoom, or that to do with this, or that you're just excited about outside of the whole situation now?
Well, the other main one that I'm using is Flipgrid, and I like that because it's very easy for students to make their own video. Now Flipgrid has it where they can alter their video, and we're actually using that in the graduate class, for example, where uh, every class we had 3 different people giving a brief presentation on what I call a micro topic. And now that we're not doing those, we're not meeting face to face, I'm having them, the person just post their presentation and everybody else responds. But the other thing I really like about Flipgrid is that when people respond, it puts their little icon down there below around the presenter's icon, and it's just a neat look. It looks very communal. And
Now
yeah.
my 3009 students are using Flipgrid this semester because of you, because you shared it with me a few years ago, I believe. And so now they're going to know that that's where that came from. It wasn't my idea. So Dr. Thompson, Mark Thompson is the one that first introduced me to that.
It
Go ahead,
seems
sorry.
pretty robust, easy to use, and I like the look of it. So VoiceThread is another. I don't use it as much, but I think it's very good as well.
Yeah, going back to Flipgrid, I think one of the things that whenever I say it, I'm reminded of you, is it's very aesthetically pleasing, the Flipgrid. And I think the first time I had students do it, they just did it the first time. I had it set at 1 minute response, and probably half the students towards the end had to rush through it really quick or got cut off. So I've just sent it over to the max of 5 minutes with them, and they can kind of play with where they want to end up. I felt bad every time I was listening. They were getting going, and then it just like cut them off. So that's an adjustment I had to make. So I'm just now looking at the time, and I know it seems like it doesn't seem like it's that long, but it is. It's now 3:17, so I think we've been talking for a while. So 2 things. One is I'll finish with a question, but if there's other things that you wanted to add that you haven't had a chance to, please feel free to after that. One of the things that you said either to me in person, to somebody else, or in an email or like a letter rec it might have been a letter recommendation when you were talking for me. You said he's one student who squeezed the most out of his education. And that was something that has really stuck with me, that I've appreciated. And because it's something that I tried to do, especially in grad school, because I finally figured it out in a sense. And I didn't want to just pay money and go through the motions. I really wanted to get everything I could out of what I was doing. And so I'm wondering if you have any advice from the professor's perspective as far as what you think students do really, really well that are positive about students, and what you would love to see students better understand or better embrace in their studies.
Well, I guess one thing is I would say, in squeezing everything out of your education, if you're talking about going to the university, I would think I didn't do that. I didn't develop relationships with my professors in a way that they were really mentors for me. I had a lot of other stuff going on, but I think you did that. I mean, I think you were able to draw on all of the people that you worked with in your graduate program, and I'm sure you're probably still doing that. So I think one thing is it's very difficult sometimes for students to make connections with professors, and sometimes the asynchronous electronic communication is a way to do that. I have one student in 4010 who says very little to me in class, but is very active on Remind, asking me questions, and I like that. And so it doesn't have to always be face to face, but just trying to make those connections, asking follow-up questions with instructors. So.
You reminded me of this semester I've had probably a handful between my 2 courses that I've talked to privately, like on my way to class or after class, who have talked to me about they want to engage. It's difficult in class time to do that, and they're shy or nervous, whatever the case. And that's usually where we end up, where it's either, well, you come to my office and just like a one-on-one conversation and connect, or some students are, that's a authoritative kind of position too. It's my office, that kind of thing. And so some students like you said, when we go through, I use Slack quite a bit. They'll message me in Slack or use Slack, and they're really engaged there and participating there. So I think that's an important perspective, is knowing that students they can engage in different ways. It doesn't have to be just one way.
Yeah, and that's another little technology is Remind.
Mm-hmm.
I know K-12 uses that a lot, and I really like it. I like that when you use Remind to communicate with a student, you can see, just scroll up and see your entire conversation with that student over the course of the semester. So I really like that little app.
Trying to look at the bullet points. I think we covered. Was there anything that you wanted to add that you haven't had a chance to talk about or ask?
Yeah, there was one other thing. Yeah. It goes back to the idea of developing curriculum. I was just going to say that one of the things I would encourage people to do is have a few things, a few things that you think you really need to teach, students. And I'll give you an example for me. And I think for you, Brett, it would be very different. For Stephanie Patterson, it would be very different, and that's good. But when I think about, it's really important for me that students are able to define something. They can take a concept and define it. They can set up guidelines. They can develop criteria, that they can argue reasonably, and they can make judgments. Okay, so but that's just 4 or 5 things. And everything I do when I'm making an assignment or putting task in an assignment, almost everything I do is just wrapped around those few things. So that's what, figure that out for yourself. What are those 4 or 5 things that you really want to hammer? Students absolutely need to know how to do this. And you can shape a lot of your curriculum around just a few things that you think are the most valuable.
You remind me of 2 things. One of them is and I think you would agree, but adding to that, having at least 4 to 5 educators or theorists who you can point to help shape your pedagogy or your definition of what you think is valuable. Because a lot of times we say, I can sit here and say, I think relationships are very valuable and essential, but if that's the only thing I can tell you because it feels good, then you're not going to go very far with that argument, right? But if I can back it up with, here's why I think we should do this, here's the research behind it, here's the main theorists behind it, the academics behind it, then all of a sudden that becomes more robust.
And your own experience behind it as well.
Right.
That's what I call your post of intelligibility. You need 4 or 5 of those posts to hang on to when the new curriculum comes rolling down the road into your classroom. You need those things to hold on to.
Mm-hmm. I like that visual. I'm thinking of, there's one other thing I wanted to add, but I was thinking of having those different posts, all these different things these main things that you need to hold on to, and almost felt like when you're talking about the curriculum coming through this wave, using those are your areas to, instead of being washed away, you can grab onto those things while this all comes through, and you have your foundation of what's going on.
Yeah, and it's not to be resistant. I mean, I think I've changed to reacting to the past pedagogy very late in my career. So it's not to be resistant to change, but it's just to be able to take a critical perspective, while holding on to those posts when the new things come through.
Yeah. There's the other thing I was going to mention was there's a book called The Activist Learner that's somewhere here nearby, and there's a passage in there where it's a husband and wife, both teachers, and the husband was telling the wife what he's doing and why he's doing it, and she kept asking him and kept pressing him, are you teaching them? And she was talking about life, teaching them life skills and that kind of thing. And, well, no, I'm not doing that. And she finally pressed him so much that she said, well, why are you teaching this then? Like, what's the point of all of this if all you're doing is going through the motions? And that's always stuck with me, and that's something I always go back to, is when you're looking at your assignments, your curriculum, can you answer that question of why are you doing this? Or are you just doing it because you're told by somebody else to do this. All right, so I'll ask you last thing, and it's very light. I'm starting to build a fence as soon as this is over with. I'm extending my fence out, and so any advice for building this fence?
Build it to last.
Well, okay, I'm off to a good start because instead of getting just regular pine 4x4s, I got the pressure treated redwood 4x4s, so I'm doing it right so far.
Yeah, in concrete.
Yeah, so my plan right now is to, I got the 6 4x4s, I got all the concrete, all the levels, that kind of stuff, and the post hole digger. So I'm going to dig and start putting the 4x4s in just a little at a time, and then take the next step where you put the grass board down and the 2x4s and all that as we go through this quarantine. That's my saving grace.
Yeah, it's good to have something to do with your hands.
Yeah, hopefully I don't hurt myself, but it should be all right.
Good luck with it.
Thank you. I appreciate you coming on and doing this, and I know my students are going to learn a lot from it, as did I today as well. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Brett.
I'm going to stop this, but it's not going to be done.